Alright, my friends, let me show you just how many things this character can do in one round of combat, and how many options we have. Notice no day-long buffs running or anything like that, so with our first bonus action, we're going to go ahead and cast Hexblade's Curse. This will increase our damage output and critical hit chance. And with our second bonus action, we could save it to hide, dash, disengage. We could drink a potion of speed or something along those lines. But let's go ahead and maximize our damage and minimize our resource use. And we're going to go ahead and just cast Hex, also on the Oathbreaker Knight. Now it's got both of these debuffs, and we'll take additional damage when we go ahead and use our action to cast Eldritch Blast. We're going to put all 3 Eldritch Blasts on the Oathbreaker Knight here, and we'll go ahead and use an automatic critical hit, because why not? So that's about 100 damage, and that's with just a cantrip. And then we can go ahead and use Action Surge to do another thing. With that other action, we could cast Hunger of Hadar, we could cast Hold Person, we could of course also just dash or run away or anything, but let's just go ahead and use another Eldritch Blast in order to do even more damage to this enemy. And despite having not rolled any critical hits, which are fairly likely because we have a 25% chance on every shot of rolling a critical, we've done about 200 damage, and of course, if the fight was going in a different direction, we could have used any one of our numerous actions to run away or do something else. Alright, my friends, let's get to the build. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I've been having an absolute blast with. Pun very much intended. This is one of the most fun builds I've played in ages. You emerge from the shadows, blast your enemies with your extremely powerful lasers, and then melt back into the darkness before they can possibly retaliate, basically turning Baldur's Gate into a game of XCOM. This character gets awesome consistent damage and great utility, has some of the largest array of tricks on the battlefield of any character, with the ability to reposition enemies, move yourself to anywhere that you need to be, hide or disengage if enemies do close to melee, and also provides incredible burst damage to take out key targets. This is also an excellent solo build with all of the tricks that you need for soloing honor mode, on top of all the things that it can bring to a party. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Big Bear for the £2 donation, BJ Nemeth for the $20, Existential Stoic for the $2, and Intention and Matthew Lockhart for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate your support. It really means a lot. Alright, let's get blasting. I'm using Wyll here as the example character because, of course, this is primarily a Warlock build, and he's the Warlock of the party. But as a build that lurks in shadows using both trickery and magic to defeat its enemies, I think this is also very on flavor for Astarion, and we do take rogue levels as well. So either of those two characters, I think, are very fitting from a lore perspective. If you're building this as a custom character, then the best pick is going to be Dwergar. We want to be starting fights from stealth almost all the time, and Dwergar's out-of-combat invisibility lets us do that extremely easily in almost every combat in the game. Other great options, of course, include Halfling. We're rolling tons and tons of dice on this character, because we're going to be firing Eldritch Blasts or even multiple Eldritch Blasts every turn. And so the ability to reroll ones will give you so many more hits, and also so many more critical hits over the course of the game. Other great picks include Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf, because movement speed is very useful to this character, and we will use it better than most other builds, with multiple dashes and every turn available to us, so we can make use of the extra movement speed more often. So those are what I would pick from a power level perspective. Drow, Half-Drow, and Asmodeus Tiefling are also really solid because the extra casts of darkness are very useful for any darkness-focused character as well. We can actually build this character in a lot of different leveling orders, depending on what you want to emphasize in the early game. If you want it to cover more of your utility skills for the party, you can start with a level of Rogue. If there's a heavy armor piece that you particularly want to use, you can start with a level of Fighter. But the most powerful way in terms of getting our combat abilities online as soon as possible is to start with Warlock, so that's what we're going to do here. Which subclass we pick is similarly fairly open, and you can build this character with any of the 4 Warlock subclasses in a very powerful way. The 2 best, though, are Great Old One, always incredible for an Eldritch Blast build, because you can apply Mortal Reminder. You're going to be critically hitting a lot with Eldritch Blasts, because they make multiple attack rolls every time you fire them, so you will Mortal Reminder and fear enemies constantly. Or Hexblade, which of course gets you all of the really powerful tools that this subclass gives you, as well as increasing your damage significantly. For this example build, we're going to use Hexblade, but it's important to know that if you want to use Great Old One, you are not giving up that much power level, and can build this character in that way if that's something that is more fun for you. For our cantrip selection, of course, we're going to be taking Eldritch Blast. That's going to be the centerpiece of this build. And for our second cantrip, we're still going to take Booming Blade. Although we're not intending to make that many melee attacks with this character, it still comes up, and Booming Blade is just a tremendous amount of free damage, so picking up Booming Blade is incredible. Also, we can trigger it more often than most other characters because we have bonus action disengages and dashes and hides, so we can get away from enemies and force them to move after us to make Booming Blade happen, the secondary damage from Booming Blade happen more often. You can delay Booming Blade on this character since you're probably going to be mostly Eldritch Blasting in the early levels if you want to take friends at level 1, but Booming Blade is still so good for combat at early levels that I recommend taking it regardless. For our spell selection, we're going to be taking Shield, just an incredible defensive utility at early levels with medium armor and shield proficiency, as well as the shield spell. Your character is going to be nigh on invincible, even if you're playing solo. And Hex, which increases the damage of our Eldritch Blasts massively. We're going to be able to use Hex and Hexblade's Curse, both, to boost our Eldritch Blast damage, and we'll be able to use both of them in the same turn at later levels to increase the damage of our Eldritch Blasts even further. For our ability score selection, there are 2 different ways that we can build this character. Either we can intend to use a stat item or intend to use some initiative gear because this character doesn't get alert naturally. I'm going to build assuming that we're going to use initiative gear, but you can also use Ethel's Hair, and this is one of the best characters in the game for Ethel's Hair since it uses the charisma so incredibly well. So if you are getting that, this is a great character to put it on. We're going to go ahead and take 16 Charisma, 16 in Dexterity, and let me drop Intelligence down here because we sure don't need any of that, and 14 in Constitution in order to get the highest save DCs and hit chance, as well as highest AC and Initiative in the early game. For our skills, the only important thing is that if you want this character to be your party face, then you want it to have as many dialogue skills as you intend to use. So grabbing Persuasion from a background and Intimidation as well as Deception can give you all of the dialogue skills if you want them. This character makes an excellent party face. You can also take Sleight of Hand from a background. We will later get Skill Expertise, so you can become an excellent lockpicking character if that's the direction that you want to go. And Stealth Proficiency similarly can be useful, so a background like Urchin can also be very helpful for this character, but mostly you're going to be using them for dialogue, so we're going to go ahead and grab Persuasion as the most important skill selection. That's it for level 1, let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're going to take another level of Warlock, which will increase our damage as much as possible and get us to our most powerful abilities as soon as we can. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to take Armor of Agathis. This is an amazing defensive tool and especially good for solo runs because it can discourage enemies from attacking you if you are the only thing that they can attack. Sometimes they will just pass their turn rather than taking damage from Armor of Agathis. We also, of course, can use the extra hit points, especially because we only took 14 in Constitution, and this lets us turn a short rest resource, a Warlock spell slot, into a long rest benefit because the HP lasts until it gets depleted, so it can last up to all day. For our Eldritch Invocations, we're going to take Agonizing Blast, because of course we want to be increasing the damage of our Eldritch Blasts, that's the whole point of the build, and Devil's Sight so that we can see through darkness. Again, the goal here is to use darkness, one of the most powerful tools in Baldur's Gate 3, to maximize our ability to evade enemies, preventing them from following us, even in areas that are otherwise well lit. At character level 3, we get to pick a Warlock Pact Boon, and normally for a Hexblade Warlock, it's mandatory to pick Pact of the Blade, because otherwise you don't get extra attack with your hexed weapon, and most Hexblade Warlocks are very melee focused, so they need to have extra attack in order for the build to function. For this character, you give up a lot less if you pick one of the other two pacts. Pact of the Blade is still the best if you're playing this as a Hexblade, though if you're playing as a Great Old One Warlock, then Pact of the Chain or Tome may be better. But it's not as mandatory to pick Pact of the Blade for this character as for others, since we're mostly going to be using ranged attacks rather than melee attacks. We're still going to take it here for the example build, because the ability to burst down enemies that close to melee with you with your very high damage and extra attack is still extremely powerful for this character, but if you want to take Pact of the Chain or Tome, you are not giving up as much for this build as for other Hexblade builds. For our spell selection, we're going to, of course, take Darkness. That is the main draw to being a Warlock, is getting to abuse this spell, preventing enemies from making ranged attacks, giving you an at-will area to hide in, and all sorts of other great benefits as well. So Darkness, of course, is always going to be excellent. And you can also replace a spell here. You can replace Armor of Agathis for Shadowblade. It's another day-long buff, and while we don't intend to make that many melee attacks at this level, we're just a normal Hexblade build, so you can still just use Shadowblade for a ton of early damage. It's better than all the other weapons that you have available at low levels, because 2d8 damage is just so much, so Shadowblade still gives you great tools in the early game. At character level 4, we get to choose a feat, and if you are taking Ethel's Hair, so if you started with 17 Charisma and are boosting that to 18 using Ethel's Hair, then you're going to choose Alert here. Of course, that is a great feat for Honor Mode, and most Honor Mode characters want to pick that up, but since this character only gets 2 feats, if you're not using the stat items, then you're going to go ahead and take an ability improvement to max out our Charisma. Obviously, doing more damage and hitting more often with our Eldritch Blasts is the most important thing for this character, so increasing our Charisma is the best way to increase our power level. For our cantrip selection here, this character can benefit from picking up Bone Chill if you don't have access to it elsewhere in the party. Preventing enemies from healing is very useful in some scenarios, and giving undead disadvantage on their attacks is really useful in Act 2, especially, because there's a lot of undead there, so Bone Chill has a lot of utility. If you don't have Minor Illusion somewhere else in your party, you should just pick that up, because the ability to group enemies or split them off from each other is so powerful. Minor Illusion is one of the best out-of-combat tools that makes all of your fights so much easier, so take this if you don't have it on another character, or take Bone Chill if you do. For our spell selection here, we actually have a bunch of choices. We can go back and pick Armor of Agathis back up. This does require you to spend 2 spell slots to upkeep both of these day-long buffs. So basically you're spending a whole short rest on casting Shadowblade and Armor of Agathis at this level. That's a totally reasonable use of that short rest, especially if you're a player who rests more often. You can also pick up a couple other spells that are going to be very useful. Hold Person is a great disable ability, and also gives you automatic critical hits with your Eldritch Blasts if you attack from within 10 feet, which is an extremely powerful tool for increasing your damage output, and Cloud of Daggers is just always a great combat option, so there's a few different spells that we can grab here. I'm going to recommend taking Hold Person, but Armor of Agathis, if you want a more defensive build, or if you rest more often, is very good as well. And then at character level 5, we get a massive power spike when we hit Warlock level 5, getting 3rd level spells, Deepened Pact for extra attack with our Shadowblade. Our Shadowblade has also been upgraded to do 3d8 damage at this point, because we now have 3rd level spell slots, and also, of course, another Eldritch Invocation. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and take Hunger of Hadar, one of the most game-winning spells out there. Hunger of Hadar is just so powerful in basically every fight in the game. There are very few combats where it's not going to be incredibly strong, and the ones where it's not, you're just going to cast Darkness instead. For our Eldritch Invocation at this level, we're going to take Repelling Blast. This can push enemies off of cliffs or back into our Hunger of Hadar. So this is just an extremely useful utility ability for a character that is planning to Eldritch Blast very frequently. If there's a spell that you're not using frequently at this point, then you can replace it and pick up Counterspell. Because this character won't get higher than 3rd level spell slots, Counterspell is less mandatory on this character than on most other characters, so we can skip it here. But even a Counterspell that's locked to 3rd level is still an incredibly powerful tool for Honor Mode, so if you find that you're never using Hold Person, for example, swapping that out for Counterspell can be a great option. Now, up until this point, this has looked like a pretty typical Hexblade build, but one thing that you'll notice about this character is that we have multiple bonus actions that we really want to do. You want to cast Hex, and you want to cast Hexblade's Curse, and usually you want those on the same enemy, but you can't do both of those in the same turn. We also want to be able to hide or run away more easily, so in order to enable that, for our next level, we're going to dip into Rogue. Rogue will get us Thief Rogue, which will get us an additional bonus action, as well as the ability to gain expertise in stealth, as well as, let's say, persuasion, so we can be even better at dialogue skills. And stealth expertise will give us the ability to hide in our clouds of darkness really easily. This makes this character extremely good at fading away from fights or wasting enemy turns. You attack, you will use your bonus action Hide that we get next level in order to hide back in our darkness clouds, and then enemies will simply not be able to retaliate against you. So not only does this make it excellent for soloing, it also means that this character gets to play incredibly safely in a party, and your tankier characters can be guaranteed to take the focus of attention from enemies. So Rogue gives us a lot of things. We don't get to use our sneak attack dice, but there are ways to do that. An offhand hand crossbow can let us apply our sneak attack because we're going to have extra bonus actions as well. And of course, if enemies do close to melee with you, you will almost always be attacking them with advantage thanks to darkness, so you can use your sneak attack with your melee attacks as well. One other thing that you might be concerned about if you are familiar with Baldur's Gate's weird interpretation of spell DCs for scrolls is that by taking Rogue as our second new class, we will have changed our save DCs away from Charisma. That doesn't happen until you take a class that has a spellcasting modifier. So because we're not taking Arcane Trickster Rogue, we will still use Charisma for scrolls and items. If you aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, don't worry about it at all. This character will play just normally the way that you would expect, but we are avoiding that bug because we're not taking a class that actually has a spellcasting modifier yet. At character level 7, we get to take our second level of Rogue, gaining access to Cunning Action Hide, Dash, and Disengage. These are extremely powerful abilities. In fact, I think these are some of the most underrated abilities in Baldur's Gate 3 because they give you just so much agency on the battlefield, letting you just position yourself wherever you want to be and disengage from fights if they start to go badly. Cunning Action Hide, in addition to just its baseline level of power, which is very high, has special synergy for this build because we're going to be casting darkness a lot. That means we'll always have concealment to hide again, so we can Eldritch Blast and then re-hide as a bonus action in our darkness clouds. Enemies will therefore be unable to retaliate against us very frequently. Obviously incredible for solo play, but also lets us play even safer in a party. If enemies do close to melee, we can always get away from them, or we can just attack them with our melee weapons, but Cunning Action, Dash, and Disengage will let us reposition, recast Darkness if we want to somewhere else, and start the whole cycle over again, so enemies just don't have good tools for fighting this character because we can always just leave if we want to. At character level 8, we get to take a third level of Rogue, and we're going to take Thief Rogue, because we get this additional bonus action, which smooths out the play patterns of this character tremendously. We have a lot of things that we want to use bonus actions for. We want to cast Hex, we want to cast Hexblade's Curse, we want a bonus action Hide and Dash and Disengage, we want to drink potions, and Thief Rogue will allow us to do multiple of these things in the same turn. So you can cast Hex and Hexblade's Curse if you want to kill an enemy really quickly. You can drink a speed potion as well as cast Hex. You can drink a speed potion and then hide in the same turn, and you could reposition and then hide also in the same turn. The amount of agency this gives you and optionality this gives you to play better is incredible, and it just gives you so many strategic options on the battlefield. So as you are a more and more experienced player as well, you get more and more use out of this ability because there's more things that open up. So it's a really exciting tool, especially as you understand Baldur's Gate combat better and better. Obviously, this ability is just excellent at baseline for just sort of the normal things that you can do with it, just casting both spells or casting one of the spells and then re-hiding or dashing and then hiding. All of those are great options, but you will find as you play through the game that you will see more and more cool things that you can do just by having an additional bonus action. So Thief Rogue gives us just so many tools at our disposal. At character level 9, we're going to take our 4th level of Rogue in order to take an ability score improvement and max out our Charisma. We could prioritize getting other levels sooner than this, but Charisma is just so powerful for this character that I think that we will pretty much always benefit more from just maxing out our Charisma as soon as possible, because it gives us hit chance, damage, spell save DC, and everything else all at once, than we would from taking any other levels. So we're just going to get our 4th Rogue level, max out our Charisma. If you have Ethel's Hair and started with 17 Charisma and 10 Wisdom, then you'll have Alert at this point as well. But either way, you're going to have 20 Charisma by level 9, which will max out this character's damage output. But what's better than multiple bonus actions? Well, of course, multiple actions. This character really wants to act multiple times in a turn, so that you can cast multiple Eldritch Blasts at baseline, obviously really, really strong, but also cast your super powerful concentration spells and then start blasting all in the same turn. There's several ways to do that, but the best one is going to be to take levels of Fighter. You could also use sorcerer levels, but to get enough sorcery points to consistently quicken spells for this character, you're going to need to use infinite spell slot cheese of some kind. So if you're comfortable doing that, then sorcerer levels are also good. But to keep the build as sort of honorable as possible, fighter levels will let us start combats by casting multiple spells in a single turn, and also give us a bunch of great benefits. Second Wind, even this late, is actually not bad, and we have extra bonus actions to use it. This can really help you in an emergency, so don't forget that you have this ability. It's easy to forget it. And a fighting style lets us get defense fighting style. In combination with our medium armor and shield proficiency, defense fighting style is very powerful for this character, giving you excellent AC, and enemies will usually be attacking you with disadvantage. But of course, the real reason that we're taking fighter levels is going to be for the second level of fighter when we get Action Surge. Action Surge is going to let us use all of our spells and multiple times in the opening rounds of combat. Let us set up Darkness plus start Eldritch Blasting right away. Let us set up Hunger of Hadar plus start Eldritch Blasting right away. Let us attack multiple times with Shadowblade if enemies close to melee. Obviously, Action Surge, just a ludicrously powerful ability all the time, so everyone is going to benefit from taking it, and this character, of course, is no exception. And finally, in order to cap out the character, we have a number of choices for our last level. We can actually put a level in any of the 3 classes that we've already taken, and it will be very strong regardless of where we put it. Rogue gets us Uncanny Dodge, giving you a little more defensive capabilities, and Warlock gets you Accursed Spectre as well as additional spells. Fighter can let you take Champion Fighter, which gets you additional critical hit chance. I normally never recommend taking Champion Fighter, but for this character it's pretty strong because Eldritch Blast benefits from this bonus critical hit. It's especially good if you went Great Old One because you want as many critical hits as possible to generate the fear. I think that the most powerful choice is going to be to take our last level in Warlock. Accursed Spectre is a very nice basically passive ability that gives us a lot of summons more or less for free, and we also get to take an additional spell here, which can give us a lot more options in combat. You can take something like Misty Step for even more mobility, or you can just take Counterspell to be able to shut down some of the dangerous spells that late game enemies will throw at you. So that is probably the strongest option overall, but taking a level in Fighter for Champion Fighter in order to increase your damage output is also an excellent option. So either of those I recommend. We're going to go with the Warlock level and pick up Counterspell for this example build, but this build is very customizable, so pick your last level to taste. Alright, my friends, that is the build, and I hope that you have as much fun as I have been having, just running around the battlefield, melting into the shadows, and then emerging to laser your enemies to death. But of course we can make this build even stronger with items and Illithid Powers, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we have a ton of extremely powerful item options. In fact, I'm only going to show you a small subset of the possible items that we can use for this character, because the items we can gain benefits from are as varied as the combat options that we have every turn of combat. Let's start with the most powerful one, though, which is, of course, the Potent Robe. For any character that's using Eldritch Blast regularly, this is going to be the best in slot chest piece, because the additional damage on every beam of your Eldritch Blast is just incredibly powerful. It also gives you additional temp HP and a bonus to your armor class. You can use it combined with mage armor from an ally or a scroll in order to get pretty respectable armor class, as well as vastly improved damage. Now, obviously, not every story path is going to get the Potent Robe. There are directions that you can take your playthrough where you don't get this item, in which case the next best choice is going to be the Flame Enameled Armor. The damage resistances to fire damage and bonus to saving throws, as well as the damage resistance to cold damage, are very powerful. It does give you disadvantage on stealth checks, so that is a minor disadvantage, of course, but that mostly won't matter. Your stealth proficiency will be high enough that you will pass most stealth checks regardless, and the bonus to initiative and saving throws, as well as damage resistances, are just excellent on this item. The Armor of Agility is also a great choice that doesn't provide stealth disadvantage as well. In addition to your chest piece, of course, you're going to need a weapon. And there's a lot of different options for weapons. Of course, for a spellcaster, Markahesh gear is going to be the best in slot for most spellcasters. Gives you increased save DC and spell attack rolls, so you're going to hit with your powerful spells more often. There may be another spellcaster in your party who wants this more, though, and this character can definitely use a bunch of other tools. Rhapsody is an incredible choice as well. The bonus to attack rolls, damage, and save DC stack up all incredibly for this character. It's also a one-handed weapon, so you can use it in addition to the Shadow Blade, or in addition to another one-handed light weapon for increased value. That other one-handed light weapon could be something like the Knife of the Undermountain King. Increased critical hit chance is incredible for this character. We're just making so many attack rolls that we benefit tremendously from increases to critical hits, especially if you went the route of taking Great Old One. Finally, this character is a pretty solid carrier for Falar as well. We're doing a lot of damage instances, and we're extremely mobile, so you can put the Shriek aura on whatever enemy you need to have it on in order to enable your party members to kill them even faster. So also a great option here. And of course, the Shadow Blade, just as a weapon to attack with, is pretty unparalleled as well. We also have great shield options. You don't have to use two weapons. The Sentinel Shield, of course, can patch our initiative, and for this character, if you aren't taking Ethel's Hair and therefore don't have Alert, you're going to want one initiative item, whether that's the Sentinel Shield or the Hellrider Longbow or the Flame Enameled Armor. You definitely want to boost your initiative over +3. You can also use Vigilance Elixirs for that. And if you do have sufficient initiative, you can use Ketheric's Shield, which again increases your save DC and spell attack rolls, making you even better at killing enemies. We can also benefit tremendously from the Boots of Arcane Bolstering. These give us Arcane Charge whenever we dash, which increases our damage to spells by 2 against enemies that are threatened. The tooltip here is wrong. It says while we're threatened, we get +2 damage, but that's actually incorrect. The bonus damage is when the enemy is threatened, and we can trigger this every turn because we can dash as a bonus action, so we can use the Boots of Arcane Bolstering to increase our damage tremendously. The Boots of Striding are also a great choice. We're going to be concentrating pretty much all the time, and so momentum is also really useful to us because movement speed is just great for this character. Being unable to be knocked prone or moved around helps this character be even better at evading what enemies are trying to do. It's also a medium armor piece, which is relevant if you are wearing the potent robe, because the defense fighting style that we have from Fighter requires us to be wearing armor, but the boots or gloves or hat that counts as light armor, counts as an armor piece, will trigger that. So even if we're wearing the potent robe here, you can see our armor is 14, but if we put on the boots of striding, it'll go up to 15 from the defense fighting style. For gloves, the Helldusk gloves are usually going to be the best in slot, just spell attack rolls and save DC. The Daredevil gloves are also really good, which let us make our Eldritch Blasts in melee if we want to. Now, because we're a Hexblade Warlock, we are usually just going to attack with a melee weapon, but if you are a Great Old One Warlock, the Daredevil gloves are excellent for you as well. The Spellmite gloves also increase your damage output tremendously, because you can take a penalty on your attack rolls for an extra d8 on each of your Eldritch Blasts, and thanks to damage stacking bugs, this often ends up being way more than 3d8 additional damage, because the Spellmite gloves are quite buggy and often apply this damage multiple times or allow other damage modifiers to stack. You will be making most of your attacks with advantage, so the Spellmite gloves, you can easily offset this attack penalty and do a ton of additional damage with those. This character actually doesn't need its damage to be that much higher, but more damage is always better. So the Spellmite gloves make you more consistent at killing enemies quickly. You can also use the Risky Ring to offset that even when you're not in darkness or hiding, so that you will always have advantage on all of your attacks. And other rings like the Ring of Protection are really good for this character, that just give you a little bit more survivability, especially if you're the potent robe variant of the build, because more survivability just helps that character stay alive, even despite having slightly lower armor class. The Amulet of Greater Health is excellent for this character. We want to maintain concentration on our spells, and more hit points are great for us, so Amulet of Greater Health is amazing. And the Deadshot will increase our critical hit chance even more, so you can use that in combo with the Knight of the Undermountain King, and being a champion fighter, then you're critting on 16 or higher, or 15 or higher with the Shadeslayer Cloak while you're hiding. That means that you're critting on a tremendous percentage of your attacks. You will get at least one critical hit basically every turn, and usually more than that. Alternatively, of course, the Hellrider Longbow in your bow slot gives you bonus initiative, so is excellent for this character also. For your helmet, there are kind of two solid choices here as well. The Birthright Hat increases your charisma. Obviously, 22 charisma is amazing for this character. We're applying our charisma to damage multiple times per turn, and multiple times per attack with the potent robe. So this is going to be +6 damage every turn, plus bonus spell save DCs, and +6 damage at minimum every turn, plus bonus save DCs and hit chance and everything. And the Helmet of Grit is also a great choice for this character as well. We can easily play at half health. We're going to be so evasive to enemy attacks that we don't need to have super high hit points, especially if we're using the Amulet of Greater Health. And a third bonus action we can use. This character can just chew through bonus actions and will always have something great to do with them. So the Helmet of Grit gives us even more optionality in combat. Finally, it can be very useful to have an offhand hand crossbow equipped for this character. We have 2 bonus actions. We're a rogue, so we've got some sneak attack dice. We can use it to, like, bonus action break a potion that an ally has dropped at their feet, for example, so that we can heal an ally with it. There's a lot of different tools that you can use with just a random offhand shot, and we've got 16 dexterity, so we'll hit a reasonable percentage of these when firing at enemies, so hand crossbows can give us even more utility. So as you can see, there's a ton of different options for this character. What I think the most powerful choice is going to be Rhapsody and the Knife of the Undermountain King, and the Hellrider Longbow as your 2 weapon slots, the Potent Robe, and then we're going to use the Birthright Hat, and we'll use the Spellmite Gloves and the Risky Ring, as well as the Shadeslayer Cloak, in order to do the highest crit chance and highest damage output possible. Obviously, a lot more defensive options are available from our items here, but this gives us the best overall ability to kill enemies, so is kind of the strongest endgame equipment, but again, you can really customize this character. Finally, of course, the Resonant Stone you can just have in your inventory. We do have Shadowblade as an option. This character does not need it, but it is an extremely powerful tool, and if enemies close to melee with you, giving them vulnerability to psychic damage will make your Shadowblade attacks hit even harder, and is going to be excellent at it, making this character even more powerful. We mostly don't care about the downsides because enemies typically can't target us with effects that target saving throws, since we're going to be hiding most of the time. Finally, this character also benefits tremendously from Illithid Powers, and is one of the best Illithid Power users in the game, because not only do we have a lot of items and stuff that increase our save DCs, which will affect our Illithid Powers. And again, like I mentioned earlier, even though we took Rogue and Fighter later, we're still going to use Charisma for our Illithid Power save DCs. We also benefit from some powers that a lot of characters don't get a ton of use out of. For example, Displace works really well with Repelling Blast, so we're going to be getting additional damage from that. And of course, this character benefits from the naturally very good ones like Luck of the Far Realms and Favorable Beginnings. Favorable Beginnings even more so because we're going to be the party face or making stealth checks a lot. So enemies are going to be... we're going to get the Favorable Beginnings buff on dialogue and on a lot of skill checks that we're making throughout the game, as well as on our attack rolls. So we get even more benefit out of this already extremely powerful ability than other characters. So if you're taking Illithid Powers, this is a great character to dedicate the Tadpoles to, because not only do you use them well, you use ones that other characters often don't use very well, extremely well. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and of course, if you have, feel free to leave a comment and hit like, helps me out with the algorithm, and I really hope that you enjoy taking this character through Honor Mode. I've been having so much fun with it, and I hope that you do as well. Of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I'll catch you next time.